everybody, this is Diana from So Very Crafty, and we are here today to make this nifty little 3D, if you will, trick-or-treat bag for this coming Halloween. Hopefully the kids will get to go trick-or-treating this year. It'll be fun and functional little project to make for every little trick-or-treater out there. It is a beginner sewing project that anyone with basic sewing skills can make simply and easily, and this is a very quick project to put together. I promise you that this is an easy and quick project. I hope you enjoy this project today, and if you do, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and ring that bell for future notifications so that you too can get future notifications for other So Very Crafty videos as they come out. I know it's a little early for Halloween this year, but it's never too early to get prepared for these holidays. So you might see me do a few holiday projects now and then so that we can get ready early on. So here we are, ready to do this terrific little Halloween basket. So what do we need in order to make this terrific little basket? Well, let's see. The first thing we're going to need is this pattern piece. And I will put the link to this pattern piece on the description section just underneath the video where it says see more. And you can get the link for this exact pattern piece. And you will notice that there is a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around this particular piece. So what we're going to do with this piece is we are going to cut 6 pieces of outer fabric, 6 pieces of lining fabric, and then we're just going to cut around this 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we're going to cut 6 pieces of Pellon SF 101 interfacing or a similar woven interfacing so that we can give some structure to our little trick-or-treat bag. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut one of our outer pieces that measures 4 inches wide by 13 inches long. And that's going to be the handle for our little trick-or-treat bag. So now that we have all of the pieces that we need, and I will put this measurement in the discussion section as well, we can get started. The first thing that we are going to do is we are going to fuse our interfacing to the wrong sides of our outer fabric according to the manufacturer's instructions. And for this interfacing, we're just going to make sure that it's centered onto our wrong sides of our outer fabric, and we're going to take a hot iron and we're just going to press. We're not going to iron, we're just going to press this interfacing on here because there is a glue side to this interfacing and a non-glue side, and you can tell on this interfacing just by touching it. There's a rough side and a smooth side. The rough side is the glue side, and we want to put that down on top of our outer fabric on the wrong side. And that hot iron is going to make that glue melt, and it's going to fuse into the fabric so that it can be treated as one piece of fabric with just a little bit of extra structure. So let me head over to the iron, and I'm just going to fuse these pieces of interfacing to my 6 outer pieces, and then we're going to move on to our next step. Okay, so as you can see, we have completed our fusing of our interfacing, and now we are going to join these pieces together, but we're going to do them one at a time. So we are going to start by placing our pieces right sides together, just 2 of them. And I'm going to take some pins here, and I'm just going to pin them in a couple of places. Now, if you are a beginner sewist, you may want to pin these in more than just a few places. You may want to pin them more, but for me, I'm just going to pin them in 3 places here. And I'm going to head over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch right along this edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance so that these 2 pieces are stitched together. And then we'll come back over and we'll move on to our next step. Here we are at the sewing machine, and I am simply going to start stitching from the bottom using my 1/4 inch seam allowance. All the way to the end. And you will see that we have this concave shape. Now we have 2 of our pieces that we have stitched together that look like this. Now we're going to take a 3rd piece and we are going to stitch that along the side. Again, I'm just going to take a few pins here. I'm going to head back over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch right along this edge in the same way that I stitched the previous edge. I'm not going to show you how to do that on the machine because we just did it. And I'll be right back. Now we have half of our basket, or our little trick-or-treat bag, sewn together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew these 3 pieces in exactly the same way as I sewed the first 3, and then we're going to come back and we're going to join these together, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. Okay, now we have 2 halves of our basket or bag, and now we need to join them so that they are one bag. And the way we're going to do that is we are going to place them right sides together and pin them along the raw edges. Now you're going to want to use, if you're a beginner sewist, a fair number of pins for this, because you want these seams to be nice and even. And you'll see at the bottom, you want all of these corners to meet up. And you can see these match up perfectly. Now we are going to head back over to the sewing machine and we are going to stitch one seam all the way down here and across the center and back to the other side. And then we'll be back and we'll move on to our next step. Here we are back at the sewing machine and we are simply going to stitch one seam. Again, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance that just goes all the way around our bottom of our bag. And that's it. One seam all the way around. Okay, so we are back. We are going to turn our bag right sides out. And there is our outer bag. Just exactly the way we want it to be. Stands up on its own and it's got a 3D kind of a shape. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to create another bag that looks exactly like this one, but it's made out of our lining fabric. And I've just used this white sort of twirly fabric for my lining, but you can use anything you want. I've used this fun Halloween fabric for my outer bag. Unfortunately, when I cut this, I cut it upside down, but it's still very cool. I didn't do that on my other bag, the prototype bag, but I'm just going to run over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch all of these together, and it's stitched together exactly the same way as the outer bag, so I'm not going to show you how to do that on this video. There's no reason, because it's exactly the same as the outer bag. We're going to stitch 3 pieces together and then 3 pieces together, stitch them both together to create the lining bag, and then we'll come back and we'll move on to our next step. Okay, so now I'm back and I've created our lining bag, which is exactly the same as our outer bag. But the one thing that I forgot to tell you is that on one of our sides, I have left an opening, because at some point we are going to have to turn this bag right sides out. So I left a small opening in one of the sides of my lining bag. So now our next step is we need to make the handle for our bag. And I've taken our 4-inch by 13-inch piece of fabric, and I'm just going to fold the long raw edges to the center, and I'm going to press it with a hot iron. Once I've done that, I'm going to fold it over again to enclose those raw edges so that now I have a nice, neat little strap. I'm going to press it again, and then I'm going to stitch along each side using a 1/8 inch seam allowance to make it nice and neat and have those raw edges enclosed. And that's all there is to making this strap. So I'm going to run over to the sewing machine and I'm going to take care of that. Okay, here we are back at the sewing machine, and I have my strap, and we are simply going to stitch it using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And there it is. So here's our strap. And now we are going to take our strap and we are going to just clip it using some Wonder Clips. And if you don't have any Wonder Clips, I will put the link in the discussion section on where you can get those, but they are a lifesaver at times. Now I just want to make sure that my handle is going to come out right, and it is. Now you will notice at this juncture our outer bag is right sides out and our lining bag is wrong sides out, and that's the way it should be. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine just real quick, and I'm going to stitch these handles on our outer bag, and then we'll come over and we're going to join these two bags together so that they become one. Okay, so now we have our bag and our strap, and now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to place our outer bag inside of our lining bag so that they are right sides together, which is why we have the outer bag right sides out and the lining bag right sides in or wrong sides out. We are going to make sure that our strap is stuffed down there, and we are going to line up all of our seams. And I'm just going to use some Wonder Clips here rather than pins, but you could use pins if you don't have any Wonder Clips. I just think that the clips work a lot better for this purpose. Make sure that our strap is out of the way. And I'm just putting a clip at every seam. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to my sewing machine and I am going to stitch all the way around the top of this bag. And that way my lining and my outer bag become one bag and we can move on to our next step. So let's head over to the sewing machine and take care of that. As you can see, I have removed my extension table for this purpose because it's going to be a lot easier for me to stitch around my free arm than it would be with my extension table. So I'm just going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance, or basically the width of my presser foot here, to stitch all the way around my bag. Just want to make sure my strap is out of the way. And that's it. We have now stitched all the way around, and now we have our opening in the side of our lining, and we are simply going to pull this outer bag through the opening in the lining. And as you can see, the lining will now be right sides out. The handle straight up, and if we stuff our lining inside our bag, we have a nice, neat bag. Now we have 2 other steps to complete before we finish this nice little trick-or-treat Halloween bag. And that is that we are going to go back over to the sewing machine, and we are going to do 2 things. We are going to close the opening in the lining. You could do this by ladder stitch if you wanted to, which is a hand stitch that you can learn how to do on YouTube, or you can just do a quick stitch with your sewing machine. And then the final thing that you're going to do is you're going to top stitch all the way around the top of your bag to secure this lining and to give it a little more professional look. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and I'm going to do those 2 things, and then we will be finished with this project. So here I am back at the sewing machine. And I'm just going to top stitch all the way around my bag. I have 2 different colors of thread in this particular machine. I have orange on the top for my outer bag, and I have white in the bobbin so that it won't show up in the lining. I'm going to use about an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure that that lining is nice and tight as you go along. I'm not going to stitch the opening closed at this point because of the 2 different colors of thread that I have in my machine, but let's head back over to the workstation. Now you will have sewed the opening closed with your machine, but because I had 2 different colored threads, I decided not to do that. I will do it later, but now I have completed my little Halloween treat bag, and so have you. That's all there is to making this cute little project. It was super simple. The pattern is free. The tutorial is free here on YouTube. There's also a companion blog post to this. If you prefer to have it in writing, you can just head over to www.sewverycrafty.com and get the printed version of this particular tutorial and how to make it. But it's a super simple little project. I hope you enjoyed it today, and if you did, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, ding the bell for notifications for future Sew Very Crafty videos, and otherwise I will see you next time for maybe some more holiday sewing and crafting projects, but definitely some more sewing and crafting projects here at Sew Very Crafty. Thanks, and I will see you next time. Bye.